that, I would just like to pass over to our Chair Aidan Healy, who will lead the discussion on this significant topic, and welcome our superb line of speakers.
Hello, Karen, and hello, good morning, everyone. It is really nice to see you today. Let me just enable my share screen here and get myself set up. And click. And Karen, just before I start talking, can you just confirm you can see my title slide, you can hear me okay, and you can see me okay?
Working all wonderfully, Aidan.
Great. This is, I suppose, not just Dodd's first event of 2021, it's also mine and many of yours. So firstly, starting by Happy New Year. I hope you enjoyed the holiday season and I hope you're safe and well. We have over 50 people in our participants today, and I'm sure we'll have some more joining us as time goes on. And we have a really exciting, I think, diverse mix of speakers on this subject of neurodiversity at work. So I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes, just as kind of Chair's opening remarks. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to do some housekeeping for the day, and I suppose dig a little bit deeper into this title, neurodiversity at work, and kind of explain to you some of our thinking when we organize this event and also what we're trying to accomplish today. So about myself, I'm a psychologist by background. I started my career in mental health, then became more fascinated on the kind of workplace psychology side. So studied leadership development, coaching, and went into more traditional organizational psychology work. I think always throughout my career, I found myself very connected to the subject of disability and neurodiversity through my own mother, who was born with a disability, and through my own life partner, who has dyslexia herself. And I guess that's kind of the personal and professional side of kind of what led me to being CEO of Lexic. If you haven't heard of Lexic before, Lexic is a specialist consultancy in the area of neurodiversity. We were established in 2007 by Nicola James, really after her own lived experience of dyslexia while working in HR. And I suppose since that time we've grown. We now work with over 200 organizations a year as their kind of partners and trusted advisors. So that's a little bit about me. I will be joining you for the day, introducing speakers, keeping an eye on timing, and also fielding some of your questions. And before I start by kind of going into our subject area, firstly, just to cover some housekeeping and some kind of common questions you might have. So firstly, you should have all received the delegate pack. In there, you'll find the agenda for the day and also bios of all of the speakers you'll be hearing from. Today is being recorded, and we will send videos of the day, videos of the session a few days after the event. And we'll also send a copy of all slides as well following the event. In terms of interacting with me or interacting with the speakers throughout the day, you can use the Q&A function rather than the chat function. The reason we're going to ask you to use the Q&A function is because if you post in Q&A, other delegates can upvote questions and we can ensure the kind of most requested questions are asked. So if 50 people all have an individual question, it's going to be very hard to get to that in the limited time we have for Q&A with our different speakers. But using the Q&A feature at least allows us to kind of take a democratic approach and ensure that some of the most requested questions get answered. If you are having any technical issues, if you have any Zoom issues, if you are having any challenges and you just want to message us as the hosts, you can either send an email. The email there is conference.admin@dodsgroup.com, or alternatively, please use the chat function and message the host of the event, and we will gladly help you out. So that's just some housekeeping for the day to get started. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email during the day or use the chat function. And obviously questions for speakers and for myself, please use the Q&A. And now I suppose really on to the day's topic, which is neurodiversity. And I was kind of reflecting on this event because I actually joined Lexic 4 years ago, and it was January 4 years ago. I attended my first conference specifically on neurodiversity. And I guess I wanted to start by kind of talking a little bit about some of the common questions I remember myself having then, and some of the things that I think might set us up for the day. So if you're not clear on what neurodiversity is, that's perfectly understandable. Neurodiversity is a relatively new term. It was only really coined in the late 1990s and has gathered more mainstream over the last 22 years. And I think when we talk about neurodiversity, I think it's important to kind of set up today by talking about diversity and some of the progress we've made on diversity over the last period of time. My partner was binge watching The Crown over the Christmas holidays at home, and there's a really powerful scene in that for me, which is that kind of taking of the cabinet photo when Margaret Thatcher becomes Prime Minister. And I guess, you know, how our perception of what leadership is, what a leadership team should look like, and what a modern organization should be. And thankfully, while there's still a lot more to be done, we have made progress. And I think most modern business leaders I speak to, when we ask them, why do we want D&I? Why do we want to get D&I right? And the first thing they'll always say is, well, look, it's just the right thing to do. And of course it is. There's obvious synergies between ethics, moral, being a caring business, and a good diversity and inclusion strategy. But I think what I also hear more of is when organizations get D&I right, there's also massive benefits and massive opportunities to the organization, whether that's capitalizing on different perspectives, appealing to new customers or talent pools, or I suppose developing and painting a picture of an organization that's modern and sustainable. And I think we also have to think about when we do D&I badly, or when we do D&I, let's say, wrong, it's not just embarrassing, it's also detrimental to business. It can cause offense, it can cause backlash, and it can cause a lot of negative perception of our organization. And we've clearly come to value different types of people in the workplace, and we've clearly given more recognition to certain characteristics like age, gender, religion, race, sexuality, etc. But, you know, we're primarily a HR kind of audience today. And I want to talk about another type of diversity I think we particularly value in HR and recruitment, which is almost different personalities and different ways of working, right? You might look at this Shutterstock image and go, oh, this is a really great mixed high-performing team. But I think we know, and I'm going to use DISC as an example, but there's others like Myers-Briggs or Belbin team rules. We also need different types of ways of working. If we put a team of reds, or what is predominantly dominant, results-orientated personalities all together in a team, in an organization, what tends to happen? They will create loads of stuff, they will storm through loads of stuff, they won't make a plan, they won't consider people's feelings, and after a while that may get a bit chaotic. But on the other side, if we just put cautious, analytical, reserved people together, we don't actually create, you know, that kind of results-orientated and dynamic organization together. And we don't label these. We don't call someone who's a strong extrovert working alone disorder, or we don't call someone who's an introvert, you know, I don't know, what's the opposite of working alone disorder? I'm going a little bit blank, but I think the point you can see I'm trying to make. And now I want to get on to when we talk about neurodiversity. What we're talking about is different types of brains. We're talking about neurological differences. And most of these differences you may be familiar with before. And Daniel, who's our next speaker, is going to do more of a deep dive into each of these differences. So I won't go into them now. But I think when you see these words on screen, or when you hear these words, the traditional model we've grown up with, the traditional model in society, is often a deficit model. We often refer to these differences as learning disabilities, learning disorders, intellectual disorders, special needs, etc. And in the late 1990s, I suppose specifically Judy Singer coined the term neurodiversity because she rejected this notion that these differences are just disorders or disabilities or negatives. She wanted, I suppose, to create a different message, a message where we don't just focus on the things people can't do or focus on their challenges, but also give equal attention to what are their unique strengths, what are they exceptional at, and what would that world look like. And I'll give you an example, I think, of how powerful this is, and something for you to reflect on when you approach the subject of neurodiversity. I'm going to use ADHD as an example. In the neurodiversity movement, we often call ADHD the double-barreled shame. The reason it's double-barreled shame is not only do you have the word disorder in your difference, you also have the word deficit. And, you know, what is the impact of labeling someone with a deficit disorder? And I think the impact is most of us, when we think about ADHD, think of it through that deficit model. Or, you know, if we go deeper, we can kind of feel like, well, there's those of us with normal brains who, you know, think the right way and, you know, navigate through the world the right way. And there must be those with disordered brains who navigate the world the wrong way or who aren't like us. And again, the neurodiversity movement, and when we talk about neurodiversity, it's about challenging this perception. And this perception starts very young. You know, this is data from the British Dyslexia Association showing that this feeling of self-doubt starts when you're a child. And I use this example because why do children feel embarrassed? And I think with dyslexia, people don't feel embarrassed, particularly children, because they might have challenges with reading and writing. They feel embarrassed because the system is constantly rejecting them for who they are before they have a chance to prove that they have far greater talents than just reading and writing. And when we approach this through the public lens, we see this, a very clear difference in how the public perceives the strengths of dyslexia versus the negatives. People with dyslexia and the members of the public, you can see here, have somewhat alignment on the challenges, but when they come to the strengths, we clearly haven't grown up with a model that says that is a balanced view. And most of us, when we go into work, when we run a D&I initiative, neurodiversity is not on the agenda. And today is about really putting it on the agenda. And so even if you're listening to this and you don't have a neurodifference, we do know that feeling of being made to feel different. We all know what it's like when somebody takes a part of us and says, that's wrong. That's negative. We don't see it that way. And so to kind of start off today, neurodiversity, we're talking about this, which is a world where we take neurological differences and we recognize and value them the same way we value other forms of human variation. And again, when we do that, I think like so many other elements of D&I, we can say, well, what are the unique strengths, the unique talents, the unique perspectives? What are people really good at? And how do we bring that out in them? And finally, I just want to talk a little bit about language. And I think this is another thing that I think has stuck with me when I went to my first event, that there are different ways of referring to neurodiversity. It's a deeply personal subject. It can go to the heart of a lot of people's identities. And as it is a relatively new term, socially, culturally, the language is evolving. So I've given you a few examples at the top there of words you might hear people use when they talk about people with a neurodifference. Neurodifference is the word I use. And also for people without neurodifferences, you may hear this language as well. And we've got a whole session this afternoon on identity and so on, and we'll certainly delve deeper into that then. So that's my introduction.